Welcome to the deep dive. You ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Awesome. Today, we're going to tackle shopping addiction. We found this super interesting article in Nature magazine called Get This, The Science of Shopping Addiction. What makes people buy loads of stuff?
So we're going to unpack that.
Yeah, it's a pretty timely topic, right? With online shopping and like all these add to cart buttons everywhere.
Totally. It's like everywhere you look, right? And this article starts with this story about this woman named Sadie, and she was a purchasing agent. So she literally dealt with millions of dollars worth of purchases every day for work. But she had this secret shopping addiction.
Oh.
Yeah. And it led her to rack up $20,000 in debt on things like cameras and scrapbooking supplies, mostly stuff she bought online.
So it's not just people who don't work with shopping that can fall into this.
Right. It really makes you think. So it's like, if it's not just about loving to shop, then what is it? Is it like a real addiction? That's what researchers are trying to figure out. This article talks about three main theories about what causes compulsive shopping: impulsivity, compulsion, and addiction.
Okay, those are kind of similar though, right?
Yeah, there are definitely overlaps, but there are also some key differences.
I see. So is there an official diagnosis for shopping addiction?
Not yet. But the addiction model is gaining more traction, especially as we're learning more about how our brains react to shopping.
Interesting. And the article also talks about how these big e-commerce companies, the Amazons, Sheins, and Temus of the world, they're contributing to this rise in shopping addiction.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right. They're using all these algorithms and personalized recommendations and those limited time offers that, make you feel like you have to buy it right now.
Right. It's like they're creating this constant sense of urgency and reward.
Yeah.
It's almost like they've gamified shopping.
Right. And the European Commission is actually investigating Temu right now because of concerns that their design might be intentionally addictive.
Yeah, I read about that. Pretty crazy.
It really makes you wonder, are we all just guinea pigs in some giant experiment to see how easily our brains can get hooked on this stuff?
Well, it wouldn't be the first time, right?
True, true. But there's definitely a lot of research being done on the brain's role in all of this. The article mentions this one study where they showed compulsive shoppers pictures of shopping centers and desirable items.
Oh, I think I read about that one.
Yeah. And get this, the reward centers of their brains lit up, similar to what you would see in someone with a substance addiction.
Oh, wow. Real.
Yeah, it's kind of freaky. So their brains were reacting as if they were actually taking a drug.
That's what the research suggests, yeah. It really adds to the argument that shopping addiction shares similarities with other types of addiction, especially when you look at the role of dopamine.
Okay, so for those of us who don't have a PhD in neuroscience, break this down for me. What exactly is dopamine and how does it play into this whole shopping addiction thing?
Okay, so dopamine is a neurotransmitter, basically a chemical messenger in the brain, and it's associated with pleasure and reward. So when you do something enjoyable, your brain releases dopamine and you feel good.
Makes sense.
So with shopping addiction, the act of buying something, especially if it's something you really, really want, that triggers that dopamine release. And the more you shop, the more your brain gets used to that dopamine rush, and it makes it harder and harder to resist the urge to buy.
So it's like a cycle. You need to shop more and more to get that same feeling of reward.
Exactly. And there's actual evidence for this. There have been cases of people developing compulsive shopping habits after taking medications that change dopamine levels in the brain.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And there's even this crazy example of a Parkinson's patient who, after taking medication that affected his dopamine, started compulsively buying thousands of pocket watches and cars that he couldn't even use.
Thousands.
Yeah, it's wild, right?
So it seems like there's a strong argument for classifying shopping addiction as an actual disorder. But the article mentioned there's still a debate about it, right?
Right. And there are a few reasons for that. First of all, the concept of addiction itself is really complex. There's no single definition that fits every situation.
Right.
And second, shopping is just so normal in our culture. It can be really hard to distinguish between what's considered normal shopping and what's actually addiction.
Okay, so how do you know if you have a problem? What are some red flags to look out for?
Well, one of the biggest signs is a preoccupation with shopping. If you're constantly thinking about it, planning shopping trips, or browsing online stores, even when you don't need anything.
Right, you're just always thinking about it, even when you're not actually shopping.
Yeah, exactly. It's taking over your thoughts. And another sign is if you feel like you can't control your spending, You're buying more than you can afford, maybe even hiding purchases from loved ones.
Ooh, that's a bad sign.
Yeah. And basically, if shopping is causing problems in your life, whether it's financial strain, tension in your relationships, or even just feelings of guilt and shame, then it's definitely a sign that you might need to take a closer look at your habits.
So basically, if it's impacting your life in a negative way, it's probably a good idea to seek help.
Exactly.
So we've talked about how shopping addiction is a real concern, and there's more and more evidence pointing to this addiction model. But what does all of this mean for the average person? Like, how do we navigate this world of online shopping and all this targeted marketing without falling into this trap of addiction?
That's a great question, and it's one that we'll explore more in the next part of our deep dive. We'll look at some of the strategies companies use to keep us hooked, and more importantly, what we can do to protect ourselves and develop a healthier relationship with shopping.
Awesome. Can't wait to dive into that.
Me too.
All right, see you in part 2.
See you then.
Okay, so in the first part of our deep dive, we kind of started to unpack this whole world of shopping addiction. We heard Sadie's story, and we talked about dopamine and all that, and we learned how, companies use these pretty sophisticated tactics to get us hooked on shopping. So where do we go from there? How do we actually break free from this cycle and, develop a healthier relationship with shopping?
Well, I think the first step, as with any potential problem, is awareness. Just recognizing that there might be an issue and understanding what's actually driving those shopping urges.
So not just thinking, oh, I just love to shop, that's all.
Right, because shopping addiction, like a lot of behavioral addictions, it often comes from deeper emotional needs.
So it's not really about the stuff itself, it's more about what the act of buying represents to that person.
Exactly. It's about looking for that temporary relief, that feeling of control, or that dopamine hit that, shopping can provide.
I see.
So people might shop compulsively to cope with, stress or anxiety, loneliness, boredom, all sorts of things.
So they're basically using shopping as a Band-Aid for, their emotional wounds?
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. But just like a Band-Aid, it's only a temporary fix.
Yeah.
And the consequences can be way worse than the initial problem.
Right. It could lead to even more stress because now you're in debt.
Exactly. We're talking financial strain, relationships getting messed up, feeling guilty and ashamed. It can really spiral out of control.
So what can someone do if they see themselves in those patterns we're talking about? Where do they even begin to address it?
Well, professional help is always a good option. Talking to a therapist can help you figure out the root causes of your shopping habits and, develop some healthier coping skills.
Okay, so therapy.
Yeah. And there's this type of therapy called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is often very effective for dealing with those thought patterns and behaviors that lead to compulsive shopping.
CBT. Yeah, I've heard of that. That's the one where you kind of, retrain your brain to think differently, right?
Exactly. It helps you identify those triggers that make you want to shop. And then you can develop strategies to manage those triggers. And there are also support groups specifically for shopping addiction, which can be really helpful.
So you're not alone, basically.
Right. And I think just talking about it openly can be really therapeutic in itself. But aside from professional help, there are definitely things you can do on your own to manage your shopping habits.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Well, one of the most practical things is to create a budget and actually stick to it.
A budget, yeah.
Yeah, that way you're setting clear limits on your spending and you're making conscious choices about where your money's going.
So you're kind of taking back control instead of letting those impulse purchases dictate your finances.
Exactly. And another important step is to try to limit your exposure to those shopping triggers, like unsubscribe from all those tempting emails and, those websites that will suck you in.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and maybe even consider taking breaks from social media, especially if you're constantly seeing ads and influencers pushing products on you.
Yeah, that's a tough one. We're so connected these days.
I know, it's hard. But it's about creating a more mindful relationship with shopping and with consumption in general.
So being more aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Right. And recognizing that shopping isn't the answer to your problems. Sure, it might give you a little high, but it's not going to fix the underlying issue.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if we zoom out a bit, it's we're facing this weird double-edged sword with all this, right? We have this amazing convenience of online shopping, but then we also have all these companies using, increasingly sneaky ways to turn us into shopaholics.
It's definitely a complex issue. And yeah. I think it requires awareness and action on different levels. Individuals need to be mindful of their own habits and get help if they need it. But we also need to hold those companies accountable for their part in this.
Like with those investigations into Temu.
Right. Exactly. We need more transparency and, ethical design practices in the digital world. It's not just about personal responsibility. It's also about making the environment safer so people aren't constantly bombarded with these temptations.
That's a really good point. So, what does this mean for the future of shopping? I mean, with e-commerce growing so fast and technology advancing like crazy, are we all just doomed to become shopping addicts?
I wouldn't say doomed, but it's a valid concern. I think it really highlights the need for more awareness, education, and research. We need to understand the risks and figure out how to deal with them, both individually and as a society.
It feels like this is just the tip of the iceberg, you know? Like we've talked about shopping addiction, but it really makes you think about how technology in general is affecting us and the impact it could be having on our brains and our behavior.
Totally. And that actually brings us to a pretty thought-provoking question that I want to leave you with. If shopping can be so addictive, what other everyday things that we think are totally normal, maybe even harmless, could be messing with our brains without us realizing it?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'll have to think about that. Whoa, that's a scary thought. So you're saying things we do every single day, things we don't even think about, could be like rewiring our brains in ways we don't even realize.
It's definitely worth thinking about. I mean, look around. Everything is designed to grab our attention, keep us scrolling, keep us clicking. Think about social media, video games, all the streaming services, even the constant stream of news. It's all fighting for our attention using the same tactics those e-commerce companies use.
You mean the infinite scroll on social media or those notifications that are always popping up, keeping us glued to our phones?
Exactly. And don't forget those sneaky algorithms, the ones that figure out what you like and then just keep showing you more and more of it, whether it's stuff to buy or news that just confirms what you already believe.
It's all designed to get us hooked, huh?
Yep. Trigger those dopamine hits and keep us coming back for more.
So basically what you're saying is we're all living in a giant Skinner box, just getting conditioned to respond to all these stimuli.
Okay, maybe not that extreme. But it is important to realize how all this technology shapes our behavior and maybe even changes our brains. We might not be shooting up heroin, but the way our brains react, the reward and reinforcement stuff, it can be surprisingly similar.
So how do we navigate this whole digital world without becoming addicted to everything? Are we all just destined to be slaves to our devices?
Not necessarily. I think the key is to be more aware of our digital habits, really question why those platforms are designed the way they are and how that affects our thoughts and actions. And most importantly, we got to put our well-being first, not just engagement.
So it's not about throwing our phones away and living off the grid. It's more about being intentional with our technology.
Exactly. It's about being in control, not letting it control us. It's about choosing to disconnect sometimes, to be present in the real world, to do stuff that actually nourishes us, not just stimulates our brains.
I feel like this has been such a huge eye-opener. We started talking about shopping addiction, but it's really made me think about how technology affects us in all these ways.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. And I think it's so important to be mindful of what we're consuming and how much time we're spending online.
Definitely. And remember, this is really just the beginning of the conversation. There's still so much we don't know about the long-term effects of all this tech on our brains. But by understanding the risks and making conscious choices, we can still enjoy technology without sacrificing our well-being.
Well said. So, to all our listeners out there, we challenge you to take a step back and look at your relationship with technology. Are you using it to make your life better? Or is it starting to take over? Are you aware of how it's influencing you?
Those are some really important questions to ask yourself, especially in this crazy digital world we live in. Remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand these things, the better decisions we can make for ourselves and for our future.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into shopping addiction and the crazy world of tech. We hope you learned something new and maybe even got inspired to rethink your digital habits.
It's been a pleasure being here.
Until next time, happy diving, everyone!